Welcome to the Simply Real Life podcast. I'm Sarah, the founder of Simply Real Health, here to help you simplify, amplify, and elevate your life. This show is for those of you who want the real talk on how to live a more intuitive and intentional life, a life that's healthy from the inside out, and one that feels more effortless, aligned, simple, and more alive. We cover it all, from health, wellness, mindset, motherhood, daily habits and rituals, to business and relationships, creativity and growth, and tiny tricks to feeling your best, and the energetics behind it all filled with personal stories, unfiltered conversations, and of course, answering all of your burning questions, all in the way of simplicity and keeping it real, so that you can create your own version of your healthiest life. Let's do it. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today we have a very, very specific and niche topic to talk about, but it's one that I do want to spend some time answering because it's something that for me, when I was going through this particular phase in my life, I really couldn't find a lot of help or ideas or support. And here is the topic. It's what I ate when I was pregnant. And let me just catch some of you up if you have not been following me for very long or don't know anything about my pregnancies or history with it, because this is not going to be a guide of ideally what you should eat in pregnancy. This is more the realistic take on what I actually ate, because for both of my pregnancies, I was very, very sick for a very long time. I'm talking more than just the normal first trimester sickness or slight nausea. I am talking in bed. I could not work for 6 months with both of my pregnancies, and that my life looked nothing normal. I couldn't eat normal. I couldn't do normal activities. I couldn't work. I was bedridden for at least 6 months of the entire 9 months of pregnancy. So what I do want to share today is just the things that did help me, because they seemed so different than the typical advice that was given or that I was trying to desperately look and search when I was in that process. And actually now I'm kind of laughing to myself as I'm even talking about this, because I think it's taken me this long. My son is 4.5 years old to actually process this fully, this experience of pregnancy looking so differently than how I thought that it would be. I guess I always had this vision, which some of you will probably relate to, of, well, when I'm pregnant, I'm just going to take my health to the next level. I'm just going to be even more aware, more intentional. And I think that if you are able to do that, what an amazing gift to give to yourself, to be able to slow down a little bit, to turn inwards a little bit more, to think about nourishing yourself and then taking it so much more seriously because you're nourishing this growing child inside of you. And that's an amazing thing. And I truly always had that vision for myself and always had this thought, well, of course, I'm not going to be sick during pregnancy because I eat so healthy. And I cringe now saying that out loud. And it was actually such a hard thing for me to process that I couldn't eat healthy. I couldn't eat well. I couldn't work out. I couldn't be working. I couldn't be doing the things in my normal life that I love, that help me feel alive, happy, and just feeling I don't know, was just feeling really good, usually for the most part. So pregnancy for me was something that threw me for this complete loop. And it threw me for a loop physically, but also threw me for a really big loop mentally and emotionally, because when you don't feel good, everything's so much harder. Like you don't have that vibrancy, you don't have that energy, you don't have the balanced mentality because the inputs are down. And for me, somebody who relies so much on feeling good, and that is my normal, it was just a complete shock to the system. So today I want to share with you some of the actual things that I ate. And also, I was not perfect. I was just doing the best that I can. And I think that this is an important thing to talk about, because when it comes to health, and especially for women, I feel like there is this added pressure sometimes to be doing it all perfectly. And even with the best thoughts or the best intention, sometimes in different seasons of our life, we don't always have complete control. Things sometimes go so differently than what we were hoping for or what we had envisioned for ourselves. And then learning how to take what is and do the best that you can with it without constantly just beating yourself up. And that is something for me that was such a learning curve for me at that time, being pregnant, feeling so, so grateful and so blessed to be able to get pregnant, first of all. And that's a podcast for another day that we will talk about. But just that pure joy and that relief and that happiness and that excitement. And then also tempered with the reality, which was that I felt nothing like myself and I felt so physically horrible and so physically sick that it was something that I had to learn how to navigate. And let's be honest, it's taken me 4.5 years to be able to talk about this. So I definitely have some stuff around it that I'm still trying to release. When I was pregnant with my son, my first pregnancy, it was a little bit of a shock to the system when around 8 weeks into it, I felt horrible. I was in bed all day long. I was nauseous all day long. And I was just frantically searching, is this normal? What does this mean? What should I do? What things help? And so it was all of the typical things that I found. Okay, you can do ginger chews, like ginger seems to help, ginger tea, sometimes doing lemon or lemon in your water, lemon essential oils or peppermint, mint tea, mint essential oils, sometimes cinnamon, sometimes spearmint. I was trying to go all natural at first to see if those things would help. And you guys, none of it helped. Maybe it was tiny, but I never felt any type of relief with any of those first line of attack things. And I think looking back on it now, I wonder though if that was for people who maybe sometimes nausea came, but if they ate a little bit of something, it would go away. I remember reading that over and over. Mine is not going away when I eat something. In fact, eating anything sounds horrible. It's going to make me throw up. Anything. I couldn't think of one single thing that sounded good. So I went down the road of trying acupuncture, which was hard because I really couldn't leave the house very much to even drive to get there. I would be throwing up along the way and having to pull over. I tried those C bands, the little acupressure points, which I feel maybe helped. And at that point, I was just willing to do anything. So I did everything with those things, just slept with them, everything pretty much besides showering because they cannot get wet. And that helped a little bit. And then the kind of typical advice, at least in the natural realm, was always to do some B6, vitamin B6, and pair it with Unisom. And that was really supposed to temper down the nausea, but also you're taking Unisom, which makes you just sleep. So there was a lot of sleeping that happened. And I remember feeling a little bit stuck and unsure of what to do because none of those things were helpful. They didn't relieve anything. It didn't really change much. I just was still in bed and still not able to think of what to eat. So that is really the point of this podcast, is maybe to give you some ideas. I know every single pregnancy is different, which you'll be able to see between my two pregnancies, even the things that were sounding good to me. And I think every woman is different. Our genetics are different. Our chemical makeup is completely different. Even things that sound good to certain pregnant women sound horrible to others. So I never once experienced a craving like around pickles or any of the typical things. So hopefully this will help some of you, because sometimes it's even just coming up with more ideas than those classic typical things that when you Google, those are pretty much the only things that come up as little tiny solutions. So with my first, in the first trimester, the only thing that I was able to eat were tiny bits of fruit, mainly just bananas and cereal. So I knew that during my pregnancies, because I've been gluten free for 10 years, I was not about to try to put gluten in my body when it was in such a state of disarray. I knew that that would just make things worse. It would probably create a lot more inflammation. It would probably contribute to some sort of autoimmune flare. It was just a boundary that I had for myself. No matter how bad things get, I know that gluten is not a helpful thing for my body. And so I want to at least keep that out. That limited my options a lot. And at least talking to friends and other people around me, that tends to be the main go-to because that is usually where all the comfort food is. But I did have some good luck finding some gluten-free things. It just took a little bit of extra thought, which is why I want to share some of these things, because they were really helpful and I feel didn't force me to go down a path of something that was going to wreak a lot more havoc in my body when I felt that was already happening anyways, and I didn't want to contribute even more to that. So I had a lot of cereal, including Honey Nut Cheerios. and rice checks. I tried my best to do some of the more natural cereals, but those two cereals are technically gluten-free. And even though they're not completely clean or necessarily true real foods, they're pretty close. And so those are two of the things I mainly existed on for months, definitely for the first trimester. I was still in bed every day by 2 p.m., could not look at a screen, could not do anything for work, could not eat much of anything else, but I was able to drink water and I was able to eat some fruit and some cereal. By 5 p.m., I do remember being on the couch and just being completely in tears, so frustrated, feeling so sick. Nothing was really helping. At this point, I was just doing the best that I could. Also, keep in mind, during this stage of life, I didn't exactly plan to be pregnant at that exact month. It was actually, we were not trying that month. And so I was right in the middle of a cookbook deal for my second cookbook. We were in the middle of shooting it all. So writing all the recipes, doing all the photography. It was a very highly intense time. I also had 6 weeks of back to back travel for work in that first trimester. So, needless to say, here's a few other things that helped me not completely be throwing up in every minute. I do remember having a conversation to get my book deal that I had to throw up in the meeting in the building in New York City, throw up before the meeting, rinse my mouth out, go sit through that meeting, almost lose it during that meeting. But I was so early along that I didn't feel comfortable saying anything yet. And then I kept thinking that maybe it would just go away. Maybe it was just the first couple weeks. Then threw up after that meeting almost immediately. So that's where life was at. Me traveling on planes that were literally like from Seattle to New York. I had things in Minneapolis. There was so many cross-country flights, which was not ideal, not ideal. I did not think through the fact that I may be completely out down for the count during this experience, but that's what it was. So here's some things that did help even on those travel days. Mint Mentos. Are you guys starting to feel better? I want to take away some of the shame of this, of not eating perfectly. For me, the boundary for myself was no gluten, but that doesn't mean I was eating perfectly. The Mint Mentos really helped me. I chomped through probably a whole sleeve of that on those cross-country flights, and they really helped with the nausea. My friend suggested doing Jolly Ranchers. I never found complete relief with that, but I know that some people really do. So I finally got to around week 20, and this is where I was able to eat something of a little bit more actual substance. Because, by the way, in my head, this entire time, I'm beating myself up. I am feeling so shameful that I'm not giving my baby the nutrients that it needs. I'm feeling so bad about how I'm eating. I feel horrible because it's not anything that I'm used to eating. I feel like I have no substance, like I'm just blah and laying there. And I feel like that mental conversation is really important to bring up because it is really mentally challenging, especially if you are somebody that prides yourself on being healthy. I felt so much shame that I do what I do for work, and yet here I was pounding the Mint Mentos and eating bowls of Honey Nut Cheerios anytime that it sounded good because I know I needed to exist. I know I needed to just get through that moment. So I just want to say that if you are in this season right now, and if you are somebody that feels sick, or if you have a friend that does, just knowing that there is so much going on behind the scenes too, and so much extra pressure that we put on ourselves. When the truth is that, and this is something I learned much later, that the baby is taking everything that it needs from the stores of your body. Every way that you have been fueling and nourishing yourself and taking care of yourself and your body, that's what it's pulling from, which is also why in that postpartum time, on the flip side, post-birth, that the focus should be so heavily on getting so many more of those nutrients back into your body, back into your cells, back into your nutrient stores, because we are so depleted by the end of pregnancy, and then let alone going into giving birth to a baby. Then if you are nursing, just all these crazy physical demands on your body of healing and then nursing, and then you're not sleeping, and there's just so many factors at play. And that is the time when you think about the natural cycle of this process of, you know what, great. If you're able to consistently re-nourish yourself throughout pregnancy and you don't have any issues feeling sick or feeling nauseous, go for it then. But if you can't, and you have to wait until later because nothing that you're putting in is staying down or that just nothing sounds good to you, take a little bit of that pressure off yourself. Just do the best that you can in that moment. That is something I wish that somebody told me, that it is all going to be okay. And babies are miracles. They somehow take the random stuff that they're given and turn it into a healthy body. And so I think that was also something that I wish I had a little bit more perspective on that I do now. And I understand that there's a season for both. It's okay if you're needing to rely on all the things you have done in the previous years before, on all your normal habits. Those things do add up. And there may be seasons where we're just not able to do that at the same rate or capacity. And that is also okay, just doing the best that you can. So around 20 weeks is where the refried beans came in. For some reason, refried beans sounded like something that I could do, but they were not refried beans that I could make at home or that I could get out of a can. It was very specific. It had to be from the Mexican restaurant down the street, the old school refried beans situation. And I could do that sometimes mixed with rice. And there was something about that that was really helpful. At this point, I could not do any gluten-free toast, no gluten-free pasta. It just sounded horrible to me and I couldn't keep it down. But there was something about the beans, which I found out later, there is actually a lot of studies that have been done that beans and lentils can be so helpful in this stage, like early pregnancy, first and second trimester. One, they have a lot of great fiber, they have great protein, but they have insoluble fiber too, which can help balance some of your hormones. And there's some component to beans that are helpful when you're feeling nauseous. That was a light bulb moment, I guess you would say, because I felt like I was getting some nutrients and it was something that typically could stay down. So that led to more experimentation of, okay, could I do something like a lentil soup or a split pea soup? Anything that was sort of bean based typically felt really good. Granted, sometimes it didn't, but even things like the banza pasta, which is a chickpea based pasta, or the lentil based pasta, not at 20 weeks. I think it was closer to 27 weeks of being able to do more things like that, where it was the photo shoot salad in my first cookbook, the split pea soup, lentil soup. Here's something random. I think because a lot of times smells and cooking, it just sounded just horrible. Keep in mind, I was writing the second cookbook, right? A lot of timing for that. I just do have this specific memory of sitting on a stool, hunched over the counter, chopping slowly with my face turned away from the cutting board because the smell of that broccoli or the smell of whatever it was, it could have even been a piece of fruit for all I know, but it was just too much to look at. It just sounded horrible, smelled horrible. So doing takeout also during this time was something I feel we typically don't really do. But that was definitely something that started to happen. And the thing that was most helpful takeout wise was Thai food. So I would do curry, which is like coconut milk and then some sort of spice and veggies. Could never really do any type of meat added in. That's usually a no-go for me during pregnancy. And then pad thai. So finding a Thai restaurant that has gluten-free pad thai. They do exist. You just have to ask. So gluten-free pad thai and curry with rice were pretty standard things that helped me so much, especially when it comes to takeout and the practical stuff. As I got closer to 30 weeks, I was then able to, sorry, back up a little bit. I was also able to do some gluten-free oatmeal if I added some raisins in there, added a little bit of maple syrup. Again, just trying to do the best that I could. I think I added some chia seeds in there because that seemed to go down fine. It wasn't until probably 32 weeks where I was able to eat actual vegetables. I remember having my first bite of broccoli then, first bite of kale. So when I'm telling you all of this, please take the pressure off yourself. This is truly the things that I ate and the things that were working for me. And I do think that there is some sort of wisdom to our bodies and to be able to trust that, even though it seems so weird and wild. After I read that about beans, and this is after I was pregnant, doing a little bit more research on it, that I was, oh, that makes so much sense. That is something that does seem like it helps a little bit for some reason. Also, in that time, I was really into doing dairy products, which I never really do. I'm not a big yogurt person. I don't love cottage cheese. I'm just not typically drawn to it. But ice cream definitely helped. And I felt that was a great thing. It felt like a win. Some of this is good, has great fat, has some kind of protein in it. At least it has some substance to keep me going. So I would do a lot more ice cream. I would just try to do the best versions that I could, the ones that have the fewest ingredients and the least amount of emulsifiers and additives to it. But even things just like whole milk Greek yogurt with honey on it, or mixed with a little bit of gluten-free granola, that type of thing. Or even I was really into cottage cheese then. And I just feel like looking back, wow, there's such a wisdom there. My body was physically craving or needing some element that were in those foods that maybe it was depleted in because I typically don't eat those things. So I feel like looking back, it's so much easier to see those patterns and the wisdom behind it and trusting that it is just a season. Yes, there are some people who use pregnancy as an excuse to eat and do whatever they want, just a free pass. And then typically, it becomes much harder to then get their blood sugar back on track and their hormones back on track and their digestion back on track after the baby is born. I feel like there is such a balance between those two things of being extra hard on yourself because you're not eating perfectly or not even feeling you're eating healthily or even somewhat healthily. That was me. And then that range of this is why I just keep saying doing the best you can. And sometimes that changes hour to hour. Sometimes that changes day to day, week to week, or trimester to trimester. That was my first experience. All right, we'll put a bow on that one. Moving forward, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I had the knowledge from the past to know that I might need to make a little bit of room in my life to probably expect some sort of the same thing of feeling that sense of sickness, that sense of nausea. And truly, in my head, that was part of my processing for myself, of getting myself ready to even think about adding to our family and having another baby. It took me a long time, I think, to work through some of it's a tiny trauma in the scale of things, but for me, it was a little bit of a traumatic experience because with my son, my first pregnancy, I just didn't really expect it. With my second, I was expecting it. And I just kept telling myself, it's not going to happen. This is a brand new experience because I really do believe like what you tell yourself and the thoughts in our head, that's the story that we create. Whatever stories we're telling ourselves is usually what ends up happening and what we create and what we expect for ourselves. So I was, you know what? I'm going to let go of this other experience. This time could be different, which, by the way, for a lot of women, it is very different. Each of their pregnancies can be wildly different. They could be very sick for their first and not for their second. They could be not sick at all for their first and very sick for their second. And it just ranges. So you don't really know what to expect. So I went into it. I'm just going to think the best thoughts that I can. I'm just going to hold this vision for myself of having this beautiful, healthy, great pregnancy. And then I did get pregnant. I was so happy. I needed a little bit more time than I think most other women need, maybe in between their children, because I had a lot to process from the first. And then I also had that time where I was taking 6 months in my bed, not able to work. So I had a lot of catching up in my mind to do with my business and getting things back on track and missing 6 months of work. Plus, then taking a maternity leave, that's 9 months out of the year that I was down for the count. So there was a lot of rebalancing and then rebalancing my body and just getting into a really good mental state, feeling like I could get all my muscle back and my strength and back to my workouts and just be in a really good, solid place, both mentally, physically, and emotionally before thinking about adding another baby to our family. And I'm so glad, so glad that I did that and that I didn't rush that time in between because I needed that. I really needed that to come back to that space of feeling really good and feeling really balanced to be able to think about taking more on. It's a good thing that I did that because when I became pregnant with my daughter, the sickness came on even faster, even quicker than the first time. And it was so much more debilitating. I thought of all my friends, of all the people that I know, I was definitely the most sick for the longest amount of time. Not being able to eat a vegetable until third trimester seemed very unique. Now I know because in this community, I have these DMs with so many of you so often that are just like feeling so alone and looking for, does anybody else go through this? Does this image of pregnancy is often given as you're just glowing and you're happy and you're just can eat these great, delicious foods and just indulge a little bit and relax. And that was so opposite my experience. And it was very hard to figure out, okay, is this just me? Is something wrong? Am I not doing something correctly? Why is my body behaving like this? I feel like me and my body are really good partners by now. At this stage along in my journey with health and everything else, why is this happening? I don't often feel like my body is betraying me, but that is sort of what it feels like. And balanced with the joy, it's just this very weird bundle of emotions together of you're so happy and you're so relieved and you're so hopeful and you're a little bit nervous and wanting to treasure this gift of life, this miracle, but then also feeling the worst that you ever have in your life. And for me, when that started to happen with my second pregnancy, it was closer to the 5 week mark. So literally, I just found out that I was pregnant, just took the pregnancy test. And I knew that I maybe was thinking that I had 3 weeks to get everything done, to tie up loose ends, to just make the most of my energy before that 8 week mark, which is what happened with Noah. I felt sick 5 weeks in, and it caught me even more by surprise because it was so much more intense than I had ever remembered. And at this point, I was just thinking, oh no, this is going to be a really, really long ride. It's starting at 5 weeks. Oh my gosh. And let alone I had a toddler at this time. It's not that I could just rest and had a business, had a toddler. There was just so many more factors, I think, going on. So even for as much mental prep as I feel like I had given myself, thank God I did that. Here's what happened. Week 5, I am all of a sudden just throwing up probably more than 18 times a day. I am in bed to the point where I cannot keep water down. It takes about a couple days of this, and I start thinking, this is much more than last time. I remember the first time I would throw up maybe 4 or 5 times a day. This was constant, relentless, did not let up even for 1 second. Even the thought of trying to eat cereal made me throw up even more. There was not one food that I could possibly think of putting in my body. It was completely revolting, even to the point of water. I tried it warm, I tried it lukewarm, I tried it iced, I tried with lemon, like none of it worked. It was all coming back up. At this point, I had a moment where I think I probably need to check on this. And I remember that we were traveling. We were down in Palm Springs when I found out and when it all of a sudden hit. And it was the day before Christmas. And I just remember thinking, I need to call somebody. I need to call my doctor. This just doesn't seem normal. And I did. And they were okay. This could be something else. We want to check how often are you throwing up? You can't keep water down. It then became this sort of emergency situation very quickly because if you go into dehydration, it's very dangerous for the baby. We had to take a flight back the next day. I have it completely blacked out in my mind. I'm not sure what happened. Kyle had to pack all of us up. We had to get us all on the plane. I am not sure how I made that flight home, but I did. Came back and turns out I had a condition called hyperemesis, which if any of you, I had always seen the word because it's what Kate Middleton had with her pregnancies, but I never really fully understood the difference between feeling sick and nauseous and that. And let me just tell you, it is next level. It is the worst thing that I have ever experienced. And it's just unrelenting. It is unrelenting and scary, truly, very scary. There's very little that you can control. And it feels like your body is rebelling against you. Very quickly came to the realization. So they flew me home, got me in to have immediate IVs, which the IVs started then 3 times a week. I had to be there for 3 hours at a time, 3 to 4 times a week, just to make sure that my body was hydrated because I couldn't keep water down. So a very different experience. I spent a lot of time in the hospital and I ended up having to go on medication, which was another mental hurdle for me because I am somebody that I don't even have Advil. I don't even take it because I feel like I don't need it. In my normal life, I don't like to take anything unless I absolutely have to. So to go over that mental hurdle of needing to take an actual medication that did have some side effects that maybe could hurt the baby, it was just a lot. But I knew that if I did not do that, it would be a very dark road and a very dark experience and would put the baby at risk because if you're not able to hold down fluids or even tiny amounts of food, it can be dangerous. So I had to get over myself, one of those acts of motherhood that is just all about surrender, which is sometimes what pregnancy is. So while I was sitting there with IVs in my arms, the place that I went for IVs in the hospital, they would have food available if you were going through these treatments. There's packets of basically broth flavoring. And for some reason, sipping on that, maybe it was the salt because I was probably very dehydrated, was something that I could keep down. So I started to do that in the beginning. I was just looking for anything and everything that sounds slightly appealing. So that was really helpful. And I ended up ordering a bunch of those packets on Amazon. Had to throw them away immediately after pregnancy because I can't even look at those anymore, but they really did help get me through. And then I was able to find some gluten-free ramen noodles, which then I could mix with that broth. And sometimes it would, I think the brand was Lotus Food for the millet ramen noodles. Sometimes I could keep those down, sometimes not. Sometimes it was just the broth, but it was just about tiny baby steps at that point. In that beginning time, there was a lot of Yum Earth gummies. Sometimes candy, your body just needs sugar, something to keep it alive, keep it going. So I tried to do the more upgraded versions of that. So Yum Earth was a great brand. Their lollipops and their gummies I found very helpful just to have always around me when I needed them, when I needed that slight boost. And then mashed potatoes were something that really helped. I couldn't be making those things. So these were things that they would have at the clinic or would be things that I would ask Kyle, can you go get these for me? That time around, I also sometimes had good luck with oatmeal and the maple syrup, sometimes with raisins, doing gluten-free bagels with butter, no cream cheese or anything else. And then after I got through that initial phase, the first trimester, that's pretty much what I existed on. Then I started to expand a little bit. And I remembered the bean thing from my first pregnancy. So I could do baked beans, refried beans, sometimes mashed beans, but they typically had to be prepared or a little bit sweeter with some sort of sauce or preparation for them to sound appealing. I also went back to the gluten-free pad thai, and we did a lot of orders of takeout of curry and rice. And don't ask me why, but that was something that was so helpful. Also, towards the beginning of second trimester is when I had this weird thing where homemade tomato sauce with pasta was great. It sounds so weird because it's the most acidic thing that you could probably eat, but for some reason, there was something in those tomatoes that was really doing it for me and really helpful. I did also start to do some ice cream. The things that helped, I would say, though, in that kind of interim time too, was doing hydration packs, the electrolyte powders. I was having a hard time finding ones that didn't have a ton of stevia, didn't have a ton of other stuff. And so I found a brand called Hydrant, which you can get on Amazon. And what I would do, because I couldn't really keep the liquid down, I would make ice cubes out of the electrolyte water and then either have them crunched up and eat it like a slushie or just put a bunch of ice cubes in a glass and slowly sip on it and keep some under my tongue. And that was something in those very early days where I was at least I'm getting some sort of electrolytes back in my body. At least something was helpful. This really lasted in this experience 7 months of being on IVs, of not being able to eat a ton. But then I was able to start incorporating some of the things that I did when I was pregnant with Noah. The rice checks with some banana, definitely Honey Nut Cheerios, trying to incorporate as many beans as I could when it felt okay. And then also peanut butter on a rice cake. Rice cakes were really doing it for me for that pregnancy. And it was great. Some good carbohydrates. And I did not want almond butter. The only thing that sounded good was peanut butter. So that became my daily routine. It wasn't until I got to over the halfway mark and closer to the third trimester that I could then start doing things. The photo shoot salad. I could do tuna. For some reason, tuna always sounds great to me when I'm pregnant with some of the Primal Kitchen mayo or something like it. Doing that on a rice cake. And so doing the best you can. There was a lot of ice cream. And at certain points, my doctor was, that's great. Any way that you can get any type of substance in your body, don't be hard on yourself for what it is. Anything is great. So I just want to pass these things along. I wish there was something or somebody that could have shared some of these other things that were maybe helpful. And yes, I know everyone is different. Every pregnancy is different. Every baby is different. Every woman is different. But if we could all just start sharing some of the things that did help for yourself, I feel it takes away a lot of the shame, especially for somebody like me who prides myself on being so healthy and eating so well. It is what I do for my work. It is what I do in my business. It is what I love and what I'm so passionate about. But even for me, this act of surrender that pregnancies have been for me have really just given me so much more empathy and understanding just for the human condition. We are not always in control, but I think taking the circumstances that you do have, being so grateful for them and for the lessons that they also give us, and also the ways that they open our eyes to other people's experiences. And that could be in different seasons of life or different stages. This is not only just about pregnancy, but that there are so many times, right, where we have to go with the flow and just do the best that we can do. So I hope that this is helpful. If you know somebody in your life that is going through a season of being pregnant, feeling really sick, having a hard time physically or mentally, please share this with them because it does feel so lonely and so isolating, especially when you're not able to really engage in your life in normal ways. That just knowing that you're not alone, that there are other people out there who have experienced this or have gone through moments where you feel like you should only be happy and you should only be glowing and healthy and just thriving and loving pregnancy. That is not always the case. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean that anything is bad. It just is an experience. And I think in sharing these real experiences, if it just makes one person feel a little bit less alone, that is my whole hope. So I hope that you found this helpful, maybe got some different tips or ideas, and maybe just a little boost of encouragement, hopefully, if you are in one of those seasons. I love you so much, and we'll see you here next week. If you enjoyed this episode and want more like it, make sure you're subscribed to the Simply Real Life podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, and maybe share it with a friend or two. That would mean the world.